said with my line of questioning, I was just concerned that if we just do an extension only here in Congress, which we don't support, how would that affect your hiring and your maintenance of employees that you have now, your investment into equipment because you have to pay that off over years, and even the financing from your bank loans? I would assume that you have lines of credit that you have to draw from financial institutions, and you do that based upon the work that you may have in the future. And if you have uncertainty in the quantity of work that you're going to have in the future, then I would assume you'd have to start looking at your workforce and planning ahead and the equipment that you buy. And are you even having trouble with the banks per se and getting the financing? That's been another big issue we've been talking about here, is have we actually helped in Congress to release that investment flow of capital, or have we actually kind of caused the market to contract back to where the capital's not even available for you? Any of you?
2 points. First, on the employment front, it's pretty simple for us, although it's a gut-wrenching decision. When you take a look at the revenue that we're creating or that's being created for us for our business, keeping our shops and our mechanics busy, the parts that we're selling to contractors, as that slows, we can only afford to keep a level of employment consistent with that level of revenue. As I mentioned earlier, we're down about 30% in our employment. Our business is off greater than 30%. Our largest expense is employee expense and all things that go into that: healthcare, salaries, wages, and so forth. So as business continues to deteriorate, that is one of the first areas where we are forced to look. As far as our banking goes, we're in a fairly fortunate situation where we do have a source of funding. However, there are covenants that come along with that source of funding, and as our business underperforms, those covenants get tighter and tighter. So we're constantly looking at that to make sure that we don't have to go back out there and reapply for more funds with our banks. But again, keeping an eye on the top line and the bottom line is where that difference comes in.
Can I ask you a question? Do you do any exporting?
Very little. Probably less than 5% of our business is exporting. We've done more over the years, but not so much this year.
Okay. Anybody else want to respond, or I think we got?
I'd like to take it just from an equipment perspective. I mean, I guess we're fortunate in that from the financial perspective, we haven't seen any additional pressure. But we're also not borrowing heavily. So they would go hand in hand. From an employee perspective, you know, our employee count is more project-based, and it's a little hard to connect the dots, you know, between an extension versus, you know, the full authorization. But from a capital expenditure perspective, I can say that 12 months or 18 months doesn't do it for us in terms of capital expenditures. You know, the service life of the equipment that we buy is between 5 and maybe 12 years, somewhere in that range. And so we're definitely not in the mode of buying equipment when we don't have, you know, a long-term funding plan in place.
Makes sense to me. Mr. Chairman, I also have a request, if I can, unanimous consent to leave the record open for 5 days in order for other interested parties to make have access to putting testimony into the record.
Without objection. Again, thank you to each of you. You've made a big difference by being here. We appreciate your taking the time to join us today. Thanks to Congressman Schuster for joining us as well. And this hearing is now adjourned.